Imagine this. It's the middle of summer in 1518 in the city of Strasbourg, France. The streets are hot, the air is heavy, and the people are tired from endless hunger and disease. Suddenly, one woman steps into the street and begins to dance. There is no music, no celebration, no festival. She dances alone, her body moving wildly as if possessed. Hours pass. She does not stop. The next day, she is still dancing. Soon, others will join her. 10 people, 20, 50. By the end of the week, the streets are full of men and women, unable to stop themselves from moving, spinning, and collapsing. Some laugh, some cry, some scream in pain. They dance for days and nights until their bodies give out, some falling to exhaustion, others to death. This was not a festival. This was not joy. This was a nightmare. History would call it the Dancing Plague of 1518, one of the strangest and deadliest mass events the world has ever seen. Part 1. The First Dancer. It all began in July 1518, when a woman known as Frau Trophäa walked into the street of Strasbourg and began to dance. At first, neighbors thought she was joking or simply entertaining herself, but soon it became clear that something was terribly wrong. She danced with no music, no rhythm, and no sign of stopping. Her face showed exhaustion, but her legs moved on their own, as if controlled by a force beyond her will. She collapsed several times only to rise again and continue. This went on for days. By the end of the first week, more than 30 people had joined her. They too could not stop. People gathered to watch, terrified, as the dancers sweated, gasped for breath, and cried out in pain. But still, they moved. The city had never seen anything like it. Part 2. Strasbourg falls into chaos. Within a month, the streets of Strasbourg were filled with dancers. The number grew into the hundreds. Men, women, and even children found themselves trapped in this madness. Eyewitnesses reported that people danced until their feet bled, until they collapsed from exhaustion, and some, horrifyingly, until they died of strokes or heart attacks. The city leaders were shocked and terrified. At first, they believed the dancers were suffering from hot blood, a medical idea of the time that suggested people needed to dance it out to be cured. So they made a deadly mistake. Instead of stopping the dancers, they encouraged them. They cleared halls, built wooden stages, and even hired musicians to provide music. The thinking was simple. If the dancers could dance it out of their system, they would eventually recover. But the plan backfired. The music only fueled the madness, and more people joined, turning the streets into a living nightmare. Part 3. What caused the plague? For centuries, historians have tried to explain what really happened in Strasbourg in 1518. How could hundreds of people dance themselves to death? Several theories exist, but none are certain. One idea is mass hysteria. At the time, Strasbourg was suffering from famine, disease, and poverty. People were desperate, starving, and mentally exhausted. The constant stress may have triggered a form of psychogenic illness, where groups of people lose control of their bodies under extreme psychological pressure. In other words, they were dancing because their minds broke under the weight of suffering. Another theory is ergot poisoning. Ergot is a toxic mold that grows on rye bread, common in medieval Europe. Eating it can cause hallucinations, spasms, and convulsions, much like the symptoms of the dancers. Some historians believe contaminated bread may have poisoned the people of Strasbourg. Others think it was something more spiritual, a form of mass possession where people believed they were cursed by saints or demons. In medieval Europe, religion and superstition were powerful forces. People often believed their illnesses were punishments or curses, and some think the dancing plague was a collective belief made real through fear. Part 4. The end of the madness. By the end of August, the terrible wave of dancing had been going on for weeks. The streets of Strasbourg looked like a battlefield, except instead of swords and blood, there were bodies collapsing from exhaustion. Families wept as they tried to hold their loved ones down, but the dancers kept struggling, their legs twitching and moving as if controlled by invisible strings. Some people screamed out in pain, begging for their bodies to stop. Others went silent, their eyes staring blankly as they continued to shuffle and twist. The city's leaders realized something had to be done. At first, they had thought music would cure the dancers, but the experiment had only made things worse. Hiring musicians had turned the plague into a deadly festival. More people joined in, believing they too were cursed or drawn in by some dark force. Now the leaders turned to religion, the most powerful authority of the time. Priests declared that the dancers were suffering under the curse of Saint Vitus. In medieval belief, Saint Vitus was both the protector of dancers and the punisher of those who angered him. The city ordered religious ceremonies, hoping to calm the holy wrath that had been unleashed. Dancers were loaded onto carts and wagons and taken to the shrine of Saint Vitus in Saverne, a town nearby. There, priests performed special rituals, holy water was poured, prayers were chanted, and offerings were made. For many dancers, the rituals seemed to work. Slowly, the frenzy began to weaken. The streets emptied. Families carried home those who survived, nursing them back from the brink of death. But the cost was already devastating. Dozens of people had collapsed and never risen again, their hearts giving out after days of non-stop movement. By the start of September, the nightmare had finally ended. Strasbourg was quiet again, but scarred forever by the memory of a summer when its people became prisoners of a dance they could not control. Part 5. The Legacy of the Dancing Plague. The Dancing Plague of 1518 remains one of history's greatest medical mysteries. Did stress and despair break people's minds? Did poison bread drive them into madness? Or was it something more supernatural that modern science cannot explain? What we do know is this. For one hot summer in Strasbourg, hundreds of people became prisoners of their own bodies, dancing against their will, trapped in a nightmare that no one could stop. Even today, the story serves as a reminder of how fragile the human mind and body can be. Under enough pressure, entire communities can break in strange and terrifying ways. The dance that never ends. When we think of dancing, we think of joy, celebration, and music. But in Strasbourg, in 1518, dancing became something else, something deadly. For weeks, the streets were filled with the sound of footsteps, gasps, and cries. And when it was over, many were gone forever. The dancing plague may have ended centuries ago, but its mystery still lingers. Was it madness? Was it poison? Or was it something we will never understand? One thing is certain: in the summer of 1518, the city of Strasbourg learned that sometimes the music doesn't stop, even when you want it to. If this story gave you chills, make sure to hit the like button. Leave a comment with your thoughts on what really caused the dancing plague, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into history's strangest and darkest events.